again, YouTube. If you haven't seen my videos before, I'm Ross, and I haven't made a video in a little while because, as you'll see in a minute, I've been busy hauling in more treasures. So in the last video, I was showing you this 5100 planter that I bought, and in that video I got to talking about how this was not the first air planter that Oliver made, or White, and the first was actually the 5400 Plant Air. And I've known where one of those was sitting for a while. It actually came from the same place as the 6100 that I have, we showed in the last video there. And so after making that video, I just couldn't stop thinking about that, because you never see a 5400 Plant Air at a show or anything. People just have kind of abandoned them, even though that's really kind of a milestone piece of technology, the first air meter that was ever sold. So I went back the very next day to the place that I bought the 6100 from several years back, and went to see if they had the 5400 still sitting there in the weeds. And the answer was yes, and they were finally ready to get rid of it. So I acquired it and brought it home, and I've tinkered with it a little bit, and I got all the blowers working, so it is theoretically possible that it will plant again. I don't know that I'll ever really do much with it, but it's a neat piece to have. I'll probably do a separate video on just this, because there's a lot of history and things to talk about with one of these. But I spent more time taking the tongue off and loading it onto the Donahue trailer than I did actually loading the planter. So, but anyway, it's back here together again, and like I said, I had it hooked up for a little bit and started checking out all the electrical stuff inside the box here. I can show you is the monitor that comes with it. You get a better view, but you've got your regular Dickie John seed monitor on top, and then your bottom box controls the air to the blowers, and you can do left and right individually. So you've got a fuse for each side there. And then it's also got, on this one, electric markers. So you got this two-way switch, and it uses like a solenoid off a starter to just move a little plunger and let your markers down instead of the rope trip. So it's a pretty neat piece of technology, and so that's one of the things that I hauled home. And like I said, I'll probably do a separate video on just this, because it's an interesting thing and there's lots of stuff to talk about. So let's go look at some of the other stuff that I got. This is a 374 3-point mounted cultivator, and it came from the same place as the Plant Air. It's been sitting there for a long time too. These guys were two brothers, and they had all Oliver and White stuff, and I've tried to buy this for several years too, just because it's a different model than the one I have. I have a 364 in the shed, and your distinguishing difference is the 364 had a square bar, and this has like a hexagon tube that everything mounts to. That's kind of an odd shape to arrive at, but it looks like it gives you a more positive clamping surface with everything. And this actually has what they called rolling stabilizers on it. So basically a coulter on each end. So I finally got him to sell me this too while I was there. So I got two things from the same place. And he has something else that I really wanted for years, and that is a 105 rake. And I've tried every time I go there to buy this 105 rake, and he says he still uses it and he doesn't want to sell it and whatever. So a couple days later, while looking on Facebook on the old marketplace, I found this, a 105 rake. So I had to go get that too, because where are you going to find another one? They're not often you see them come up for sale. So when you look around and want to see if you think that's what it is, one of the easiest ways to tell in the pictures is, I think that the Darf rake is about the only one that has this wheel on the inside of the tube. All the farmhand rakes, the wheel was on the outside, and I think that was the way with a lot of the other brands. So that's one key thing that you can look for if you're just glancing through a bunch of ads for rakes. And then if you look at the tag, it says manufactured by Darf Corporation, and then at the bottom it says distributed by Oliver Corporation, Chicago, Illinois, model 105. So I've got one of these now. I need to do a little repair work to get it ready for the field again, and that kind of completes my lineup of Oliver hay rakes as far as the from the 60s and 70s. I can start going backwards, I guess, and find a number two, the number 1 and number 2 rakes like on steel. But anyway, something I've been wanting, and I found one for a reasonable price and not that far away. So anyway, that's another thing that I acquired over this last week or so. And finally, on our list of things that have made their home here to the Home for Stray Olivers is this Oliver 60. A guy who lives next to my dad, his father had this. I don't know where he bought it. He bought it, I don't remember if he said from some guy so that an equipment jockey couldn't buy it because he didn't want him to have it. But anyway, he called me up and wondered if I was interested, and I really wasn't that interested at first, but he called me back several weeks later, and the deal got just too good to pass up. So I thought, here, it has to come live with me. So this one is actually an older 60 than my other one, which is right over there for comparison. This one is a 4-speed 60. You can see some of the differences here in a minute. I'll show you, but it has individual brake pedals and doesn't have the equalizer bar. And like I said, 4-speed transmission. This one is on 36-inch rubber. And this is the worst part about this tractor right here, is this rim is just totally garbage. And I'm thinking, depending on how it runs, if it runs decent, which I have never heard it run, we're gonna find that out here in a minute. I think it may be going on full steel. So we'll see how that goes, but it's a fairly complete little tractor, kind of rusty, but the fenders, if you've ever been around a 60, most fenders are junk because of that right there. The bottom of them rots out, but these are still solid enough that you could fix them, and that's more than I can say for the ones on my other 60. They were not quite in this good a shape. This one's really kind of an above average original fender, but anyway, it's missing a few little things. Belt pulley, and the arms on the power lift are missing for whatever reason, and somebody bought a pair, I guess, thinking that they would fit, but these must be off like a fleet line because they're not even close. So that's something that I'll have to find if I want to put mounted tools back on it. But anyway, let's go take a look at the other 60 real quick, and then we'll come back and see if we can get this one to run. So here's my other 60. This one I think is a 47 or 48. It's one of the last years they made it, and this one's got 5-speed transmission, and it's got the equalizer brakes on it. You can see the shift pattern if you're wondering. The early ones did not have the 5th gear because a lot of them were probably going to be on steel wheels, and you don't want to go fast with steel wheels, so they were just a 4-speed tractor. It's interesting that you can get to both 5th gear and you can get to reverse in both ranges, both the high and low range. So that's something interesting. And it's also got a position, which it's in right now, where you can put it where the belt pulley will not turn while you're sitting still, because anytime your foot's off the clutch, the belt pulley will be turning unless you have it in that position. So that's kind of nice if you want to leave it sitting idle and you don't want everything running all the time. This is the style seat that they're supposed to have. The other one did not have that, but it's interesting, if we go look at the other one again, that it has this pan seat with a piece of wood under it, and that is exactly the same style seat and setup that was on this other 60 when I bought it. So I don't know if this was the style that was sold by a farm store or what, but it's interesting that two tractors had the same almost identical conversion done to it to get rid of the original seat when I guess the cushion wore out. Other big difference between the two, the later 60s had these 28-inch wheels, and that was a pretty common thing to find, and your early ones had 36s. So just a few differences between the two tractors, but basically the same. I'll probably do a video on just Oliver 60s here one of these days, and we can take a look at some literature and stuff for them. But for now, let's go back and see if we can get this other one brought to life. Okay, if we look at this, it's fairly complete. It does not have a generator or alternator. Somebody's robbed that off of it. But it actually has some type of fuel in the tank. I'll probably go ahead and drain that all out now before we get started, because I don't know what kind of shape that's in. But and I tried turning the sediment bowl on and it just drips. Now it's not even gonna, well, there you go. So it's obviously that it needs cleaned out before we get started. And the engine oil looks pretty good and it's in the right range, but you never know. Sometimes people, after they ruin a motor, think they're gonna fix it by pouring nice clean oil in it. So we don't know yet that that's a good thing or bad thing. And I believe that if we check this, I was thinking that it had water in it, but maybe not. It looks pretty dry, but anyway, we'll find out. I just noticed something here, and that is that our oil pressure line for our gauge is non-existent. Somebody has broke it off or something. So before we do anything, I think we're going to have to address that. Put a plug in it or something. I would like to know what the oil pressure is though, so I may end up going to get a another piece of tube or something. But we can probably run it for just a second and see at least if it'll run, and then address that. Okay, so I've got this piece of oil line, which actually came off of the 4180. If you remember my video talking about that, I had it all back together and then it started leaking oil out of this line. When I pulled it out, you could see this place that was practically rubbed through, and I guess I disturbed it just enough that that was the end and it started leaking. So I replaced that, but I never throw anything away, so this is still laying around. So I think what I'll do is I'll just break this off and kink it over so it doesn't leak, and then we'll use it as a plug to test this tractor out first, because it's not stuck, but that's all we know about it. I mean, it might knock like a Jehovah's Witness, so we don't want to waste money on something like this if it's not going to be worth doing anything with. So we'll swap this out and then we'll move on to something else here. We'll probably drain the fuel out and then check our points. I got a different coil because I'm not even going to fool with this old coil. I don't know if this is 6 volt, 12 volt. I know nothing about this coil, so we'll just go ahead and swap it out to one that I know will do what I want, and then we'll give it a try and see if it'll start. you're wondering why I was struggling with that so much, this wrench that I grabbed is one of these stupid Craftsman ones that's got this little notch out of it where you're supposed to be able to quick ratchet it. Well, that's next to worthless on an open-end wrench, so. But I was too lazy to walk up and get a different one, so I think it's on there enough that it's not going to gush oil all out and ruin everything. But it might already be ruined, so who knows. Now we will go ahead and swap this coil out with one that I know will be good, and then we won't have to worry about that being a problem. So I'll try to set you down here somewhere. Now, if you're wanting to convert your tractor to 12 volts, I usually use one of these, which is a IC14SB from Napa, or you can use an IC14. They're the same thing, just this is the cheaper line. This is the one they had. And anyway, this is a 12 volt coil that doesn't require the external resistor, that little porcelain block. I just think it looks cleaner to use one thing instead of two. I'm kind of concerned. This seems to have oil on it. I hope it's not leaking. It might not be good after all, even though it's new. So we'll put it in and we'll give it a try. Another question people ask is which one of these wires goes to the distributor? And the answer is it depends on what your ground is. So if we're going to set this up for negative ground, then the negative terminal needs to go to the distributor, to the points. And if it was positive ground, we'd put the positive one to the point. So that's what we'll go ahead and do right now. And I think I got a little piece of emery cloth here. We'll sand this up a little bit so that we can get a good connection. For this side, we've got our little test jumper wire we'll use, and we'll just hook it right to the battery, pull it off the battery if things go south, because who knows what kind of shape the switches on the dash are in. So we're basically just going to bypass everything except for the starter button and use it to turn it over, and then this will be our ignition switch. Okay, now we're going to check and see what kind of shape these points are in, because I'm sure that at the very least they're oxidized. Okay. Yeah, they got some oxidation on them. So what we'll do is we will fold our emery cloth in half, wedge it in there, which is fun to do one-handed here. Oh yeah, look at all that coming off of there. So this definitely needs to be done because there's no way it'll fire with that crap on there. So starting to look good. Give it a little more. That should be good. Now, it appears that somebody has had all the spark plugs out, so they're just hand tight. So we'll have to check that out and tighten them up. I want to see though, if I rotate the motor, if the points open and close, which I don't think that they're doing. Maybe, there we go. No, they are. They're open. If you can see them, just a little bit of a gap. And then should go closed here. There we go. I think that's close enough to try. So we will go on to the next thing. What we got going here, somebody left the old crush washer off of the last spark plug on here too. So I don't know why we've done that, but looks like they've done it on all of them, and that's not something that we need. So I'm gonna take those off, I suppose, tighten these plugs up, and the firing order on a 4-cylinder is either 1342 or 1243. So if that doesn't make any sense to you, here in just a second I will explain it. I was trying to find the rotor. I dropped it somewhere, so before we put the cap back on, we need to find that. But anyway, if we set this on here like it fits, and your distributor turns, number 1 is the first one that fires, and then 3, and then 4, and then 2, because it goes like this around. So if you need to check if your wires are on backwards, for a 4-cylinder it's only one of those 2 combinations. So I guess if all else fails and you can't find any print on what kind of motor you're working on, then try it one way, and if it doesn't work, try it the other way, and whichever way runs smoothest. You can go by taking the valves off, the valve cover off, and watching the valves, then you'll know for sure. But on this one, 1342 should be correct. And just to show you, we'll go look at the other one, which I know is correct, and compare. Here on the other 60, we have 1, 3, 4, 2. So we know that is the firing order for a 60. So we're in good shape. So I found my rotor back. It was laying on the ground right by my foot. So we'll probably give that a little sand up with the emery cloth too before we put it back in here. And we want to make sure we put it back in there, because otherwise we'll be frustrated later that it won't start because it doesn't have all the pieces in it. I also should mention that I guess before we put these spark plugs in, we better check and make sure they all have a gap, because that happens. Like I talked about in the 1550 video, the guy went to put one in who had it before me, and he smashed it flat and didn't realize it, so that's why the tractor had a miss in it. So we will pull these out one at a time and just double check to make sure that they have some gap. I'm not real concerned with perfect gap right now, because we don't know what we're going to find when we get this started. Some of our spark plug wires look kind of questionable, but hopefully they will get it running enough that we can see that this is worth continuing. Well, I think we got our ignition side ready to try. Now we'll go work on the fuel side and probably drain that nasty fuel out of there and see why the sediment bowl's plugged up, and then we will put clean fuel in and see if we can get it to come to life. Well, here we are on the opposite side of the motor, and we will try to get the connections loose here. Somebody has swapped them out at some point in time, so we have a potential of not destroying this stuff, but we'll see if I can get in there and not block your view, which may not be very easy to do. Can enjoy looking at the back of my hand, I guess. All right, I got my little rubber pan under there. We'll see how much good that does. See if we can get this out of here. Get this bail off of there. Like I said, somebody's replaced this at some point. That's good, which means we have a chance of getting everything apart and back together without destroying it. Most generally, when I pull tractors out of the weeds, I just replace the sediment bowl right away, because you can never get the old ones to shut off or whatever, and it's just simpler. So here we go. Let's see what comes out of this. It's kind of hitting the pan, so that's good. It's really not that bad looking. Like I said, we're just going to drain it all out though, because I don't want to fool with old rotten gas. You can see inside of this sediment bowl, maybe if I get the right light, it's plugged solid with rust. So we'll clean that out, put it back in, fill it full of new fuel. So we're gonna maybe blow some brake clean or something through there and get this cleaned out. Inside of the neck, some of the stuff that has made its appearance. We have rust, and we also have silicone, which is not the correct thing to use to seal the threads. I think that people should probably need to have a license to buy silicone, because some people just go way overboard and it causes more problems than if they would have just used nothing at all. So, but we'll clean it out and we'll use some actual thread tape, and then hopefully we'll be in good shape. Okay, we got our Teflon tape on there, so we're gonna try to put this back. There we go. Take extra time when you put those back so you don't accidentally cross thread them, because that would be sad if you ruin the threads in your tank. Now we'll go ahead and put some gas in it now, and then see what we got coming out, and then we will get a battery and see what happens. We'll loosen this up a little bit so it can get some air and see what kind of flow we have out of the tank. Should get 2 streams coming out of there if we did a good job, and we did. So we'll tighten this back up. Turn the fuel on and go get a battery. That'll give us a chance to see if our carburetor is stuck open and will leak all over the place. So we'll get a battery and we'll try to start it. Okay, I'm having some electrical difficulties here, but we're going to use jumper cables and see if we can get it to run. I can't get the push button to crank it, so. I haven't got any life. We'll just do a quick intake hose delete here where we can get in and hand choke it. It's really not going to hurt this. Hose is junk anyway. We'll give it a little shot of brake clean. The green can brake cleaner seems to be good starting fluid for gas engines, so we'll see what happens. Almost. Well, we're on the way. Let's see what we got in the way of throttle action here. And I realize what I'm doing. I need to take the positive cable off. There we go. We need the ground to go to the tractor through the jumper cables, or it won't run the points. So we'll do it that way. Well, it's got life in it, but we aren't getting any fuel, I don't think, out of the tank yet. So I imagine we'll probably be taking the carburetor apart, but we can give it another try here and see if we can get it sprung to life. And then we'll wire it up correctly with switches and whatnot. Almost. Our biggest problem here is our choke cable is stuck. So we need to, there we go, just manually choke it. Pull it through the clamp. Well, that's enough proof of concept to know that I need to hook it up correctly so that we can actually accomplish something. And it looks like it's got oil pressure because I didn't get my tube crimped shut enough and it's puking oil all over everything, so that's a good sign. So I think we will get some more parts here and get it hooked up better, and then we will try it again. So I pulled the plug out of the bottom of the carburetor, and even with the fuel full on, we're getting nothing. So we definitely need to take this apart and at least see what's going on. And then we should be closer to having something that runs on its own. I'm also gonna get better battery cable, starter cable, and then an oil line for the gauge, which I may have to just get a totally different gauge. I never even looked at it to see. It might work, but we'll see. It's not even attached. Isn't that nice? So who knows if that really works or not, but we'll do something there, and then we will see what we get, and I think we'll be in business. Well, here's your problem. It's quite rusty. It's not the worst I've seen, but it's definitely not good. So we're gonna have to clean this up and rebuild it before we can do anything. It was quite stuck together. And we found more of the mechanic's friend, silicone, which again is not the way to go, especially on a carburetor. There's too many places that little pieces could get sucked in. So I'll go to town and get carburetor kit and probably some better battery cables, maybe a push button. I need to test that and see if it's any good, and then we should be able to run it for longer than just a second. Remember, if you like Oliver and White videos, hit that thumbs up and subscribe, and I will keep making stuff that features Oliver and White equipment. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.